This week on Jerusalem Dateline, a special edition on the progress of the Abraham Accords. CBN News traveled with a delegation led by author Joel Rosenberg to Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and back to Jerusalem. We'll hear from the newsmakers and some of the architects of this historic and game-changing agreement to the Middle East. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you this week from Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates. CBN News joined a delegation led by Joel Rosenberg to check on the status of the Abraham Accords after they were signed on the White House lawn in September of 2020. The delegation met with many of the players involved in both developing the accords and implementing them. Joel Rosenberg has led delegations of evangelical leaders to many of the Sunni Arab nations in the region. He explains what made this one so unique.
I was invited by the governments of Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and Israel to bring a group of evangelical leaders to each country post-Abraham Accords. The 6 other evangelical delegations I led were to explore whether peace was possible and what was the relationship between Israel and the Jewish people and Christians with the Arab Muslim world. But the world has changed, not only COVID, but the Abrahamic Accords have been the game changer in the region. And I actually was moved and surprised that these countries each said, let's do something to celebrate and explore now that we have this historic normalization agreement. How's it working? And where do we go from here? And how can evangelicals be part of it? So that I think is what's made this 7th delegation unique from the others.
The second country to join the Abraham Accords was Bahrain, a tiny island nation here on the Gulf. For Bahrainis, they said that joining the Abraham Accords wasn't normalization, but formalization.
One of the things that was interesting when I wrote the book Enemies and Allies is I met with a very senior Bahraini official and I said, why have you decided to normalize relations between Bahrain and Israel? And why now? And they said, no. We don't call it normalization. We call it formalization. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, we've wanted peace, and behind the scenes, we've had peaceful cooperation with intelligence and security officials in Israel. We just haven't been able to be public about it because it was not kosher, or maybe here you'd say halal. But this gives us an opportunity through the Abraham Accord to say we want a strong alliance, not just peace and normalization. We want an alliance with the nation of Israel and with the United States, and I've been pretty impressed by that.
The first leader the delegation met was Israel's ambassador to Bahrain. CBN News sat down with Eitan Naeh from Bahrain's capital, Manama, for an interview to discuss the progress of the Abraham Accords. The ambassador says the Middle East is undergoing historic changes.
I saw 2 Israeli embassies open in the Gulf, one in the UAE, one in Bahrain, a consulate general that was opened in Dubai, dozens of agreements that were signed.
From the birth of the Abraham Accords on the White House lawn, Ambassador Naeh has been a key player in the agreements.
They are a significant, in fact, historical change to the course of events in the Middle East. They are an effort to take a road that has not been taken before, establish a relationship between Israel and Arab countries, and not just that, it's proving to the rest of the Arab countries, to the rest of the world, and to the rest of the people in this region that it is possible.
But about 100 miles from Manama, the capital here in Bahrain, and across the Gulf, lies Iran and its regime that represents an existential threat not only to Israel, but to this tiny Gulf country. Ambassador Naeh says the Gulf countries see the Iranian nuclear deal just like Israel does.
We hear from them exactly what we say. I think that the threat and the threat perception, the threat levels are pretty identical by those who live in this region, by those who experience the kind of behavior that Iran got infamous for. And the threat, the concern is real. We all know that the mother of all problems in the Middle East is Iran. All we have to do is to watch the news.
During our time in Manama, violence continued to rock Jerusalem's Temple Mount. Ambassador Naeh explains the rioting is nothing new.
In the 30s, amid a wave of Jewish immigration to then mandatory Palestine, running away from Hitler, just prior to the Second World War, and what the Palestinian leader then Hajj Amin al-Husseini saw as Arab indifference. He came up with the idea of how to attract attention, and Al-Aqsa was the answer. The Jews are threatening Al-Aqsa. He disseminated this fake news. They didn't call it then fake news, but lie, and it caught fire. And it is still catching fire.
He says the rocks being thrown are not just at Israeli police and Jewish worshippers at the Western Wall.
But they're really thrown at the Abraham Accords. I asked our viewers, your viewers, to really zoom out from just this event and say, look, they're doing it for the second year since the Abraham Accords were signed in order to derail the Abraham Accords.
Ambassador Nae points to the media's impact in the region.
The peace process cannot advance without the public opinion. And the public opinion here in the region is being influenced by other media outlets that disseminate lies, fake news, and the role of the media is to really show the truth uncut, to show the truth, to give the full picture, and to explain to people what we're trying to do here. And that is an immensely important.
Nae also says they welcome prayers from Christians around the world.
Yes, we need those prayers, we need this help, we need those people who can to come and visit, to see in their own eyes that a new reality is being born. And those among our viewers who have business in the Middle East, come and do business with Israel, with Bahrain, with the UAE, bring people together and still pray for the peace of Jerusalem and the region.
Up next, a look at the main player in the region opposing the Abraham Accords, the Islamic Republic of Iran.
The war in Ukraine has triggered the largest humanitarian crisis of this century. Millions of refugees, women, children, and the elderly, society's most vulnerable. No electricity, no food, nothing to drink. They face sickness but lack medicine. In response, the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund is providing food, water, hygiene kits, solar-powered chargers, water filtration kits, and urgently needed infant formula. You can help. Our teams are uniquely situated across the region and within Ukraine. You can help rush aid and life-saving supplies to mothers, children, babies, the elderly, and all those in need. To send help, call 1-800-700-7000 or go to ob.org/crisis. Download the CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today. The Bible tells us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. In CBN's free guide, 10 Ways You Can Pray for Israel, you'll learn spiritual lessons from Israel's patriarchs, prophets, and beloved New Testament leaders, while also discovering how you can pray for Israel today. Get your free copy. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/pray-for-Israel.
While the Abraham Accords made significant, even historic changes in the region, there are forces opposing these agreements, led by the Islamic Republic of Iran. During the meetings the delegation had with leaders in the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel, it was clear the main threat to the future of the Abraham Accords is Iran. In fact, one official told the delegation his country's three main threats were Iran, Iran, and Iran. During the trip, Joel Rosenberg gave a copy of his book, Enemies and Allies, to many of these Middle East leaders, many who were intimately involved in the establishment of the Abraham Accords. Rosenberg addressed the Iranian threat in his book, and when the book was published, we discussed the threat of Iran in this interview.
So the good news is some of the major non-state terror organizations and actors are not the magnitude of the threat that they once were. The bad news is that in all of the chaos of the Middle East of the last 20 years, Iran, no matter what the United States and Israel has done, Iran is more dangerous today than ever before, and they are dangerously close to building not just one nuclear warhead, but an entire arsenal. They have also built out their ballistic missile force, not only to be able to reach here in Israel, but to be able to reach Europe, and they're getting closer to being able to reach the United States with intercontinental ballistic missiles. And Iran's alliances, I really spend a lot of time in the book, their alliances are more dangerous than ever. They've built this really close strategic alliance with Russia, with Turkey, with North Korea, and increasingly with China. Now, each of those alliances look a little different, but they are dramatically stronger. Iran's regime is dramatically stronger today because they have these anti-American, anti-Western, and very hostile enemies as their allies. And several of those countries, of course, are nuclear armed themselves, which makes the Iranian nuclear threat even more dangerous.
Plus, they built proxies throughout the region. Iranian militias in Iraq, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis down in Yemen as well.
That's right.
Almost surrounding Israel, as well as some of the Sunni Arab nations.
And I think that the countries that have allied themselves with Iran's regime, I don't think they understand who they're in bed with. I think all of those leaders in all of those countries believe they are using Iran to poke in the eye of the United States and to mess with Israel and the Western alliances. I don't think that these leaders and nations believe that Iran is setting the agenda, that Iran is setting the pace, that Iran has genocidal ambitions. The Iranian leadership doesn't want to just improve their position in the region. Iran's leadership are driven by an end times radical, apocalyptic eschatology that believes that at the right moment, the Ayatollahs will be able to annihilate Israel, which they call the little Satan, and that's only their first objective. Ultimately, they want to annihilate, destroy the United States, which they call the great Satan. And I don't think Putin or the Chinese leadership or Recep Erdogan, and the great leader in Pyongyang, North Korea, I think they are seeing Iran as part of an anti-Western, anti-American alliance. Let's just get everybody who hates America and hates the West, let's get them all in one big semi-unhappy family. I don't think they realize exactly who they're in bed with when it comes to the Iranian regime.
Up next, leaders in the region discuss the status and the future of the Abraham Accords.
Names from the Old Testament are being unearthed all over the city of Jerusalem.
This was amazing. Come as close as you can get to personalities that are known from the Bible.
Astonishing discoveries made today.
A jaw-dropping moment of Bible archaeology.
This is much more than a thrill. This is actual history that took place here on the site where we sit right now.
Confirm the kings and prophets of the Bible left real evidence of their lives.
Right time, the right place, with the right people.
And one of the most significant finds in recent history.
Exactly as the Bible tells us happened in the days of King Hezekiah.
Written in stone, kings and prophets.
We have the Bible and we have archaeologists. Telling our story, it's matching.
The Old Testament is a reliable history book.
Get your copy today for a gift of any dollar amount. Call now or go to cbn.com/written in stone.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us regent.
This summer, meet Superbook's Heroes of the Bible. 3 stories of people who fought giants, faced rulers, and stood strong for their faith, and overcame. Join the CBN Animation Club and get Gizmo Go, Invasion of the Bugamites, plus 2 copies to share with others. All for your gift of only $25. And as part of our Heroes of the Bible bonus, receive 3 additional Superbook episodes as our way of saying thanks.
Remarkable progress has been made since the signing of the Abraham Accords on the White House lawn in September of 2020. But what does the future hold for these agreements that have brought together Israel and its Arab neighbors? In Israel, the delegation met with former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, one of the main architects of the Abraham Accords. Friedman explained the behind-the-scenes story of how the Accords unfolded and sat down with CBN News to give his assessment of the future of the Accords.
I think we're in a good place with our existing partners. I'd like to be expanding that circle of peace. I think we need to be stronger as a nation and more resolute about our priorities before that's going to happen. But within the existing circle, Israel, UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, I think we're strong. I think we're good. I mean, look, we've withstood challenges, whether it was the Hamas war or the Temple Mount. We've dealt with, I say the United States, Israel as partners. They've discussed these issues, I think, with as friends, and I think they've resolved them. So I think we're in a good place.
In the UAE, the delegation met with Dr. Ali Rashid Al Nuami, senior advisor to the Crown Prince. He said the UAE is bullish on the Abraham Accords.
We assure you that there is no way back when it comes to Abraham Accord. We shouldn't just stop. We should keep pushing, keep the momentum. We push the boundary, engage others, because our enemy, they are not settling. They are not stopping. They believe in what they are doing. They are fighting for their cause. We should fight for our cause, which is peace.
He sees the UAE in a lead role in the agreements.
The UAE role in pushing the boundary, keeping the momentum to promote peace and engage others in peace. Because at the end, we have to bring everyone in the region to be part of this. We are committed that the Abraham Accord is there to last. It's not something that it's a signing. No, it's a full engagement. We see it not only a UAE and Israeli relation, we see it as an agent of change for the whole region. And this is what we are committed to do.
CBN News also sat down with Dr. Ralph Leo. Leo is chairman of the executive board of Kanad Hospital, begun by evangelical missionaries more than 60 years ago.
But just from the perspective of the street, I would say I've seen a real shift in the attitude of young people. I'm a professor here at the university. The attitude of young people has suddenly become, you know what, Israel's okay. Jewish people are our friends, they're our cousins. And it's happened quickly, it's been quick.
Really, have we seen such a dramatic impact in just a year and a half?
It has. This is a culture where things are led from the top. And when rulers make a decision, the people will quickly follow. They really respect their rulers here, and they respect their judgment, they respect their wisdom. It's reflected in the order that you see in society.
Talk about the leader here at the UAE. How courageous a decision was it to actually join the Abraham Accords?
That cannot be overstated, because I think we miss it maybe in the West. We don't really understand the risks that were taken by the UAE government in general, by the Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, God bless him. You're going to make a lot of enemies for a move like that. And they were willing to take the risk for their own reputation with various different groups, for their own security. They were willing to take the risk to do what was right. And I have to applaud them for that. Everybody wants to talk about peace, right? But who's going to be the first one to take that first step, right? And that's what we saw here from the UAE. Somebody had to be first, and they weren't afraid to do it. And then you're seeing other people follow. We have had now 4 different delegations of Israeli academics, doctors, professionals, students from Tel Aviv University who are so curious and so excited. What they've expressed to us is they felt like strangers in their own neighborhood for their whole lives. And for the first time, they feel like, this was their quote, they said, we can come out of the bunker and join the family. Wow. That was their words, not mine.
2 American Christian physicians answered the call to help out the Bedouins even before the UAE was a nation.
Well, they changed the perspective of a nation, right? They came before this was a nation. Desert wasteland. No roads, no cars, no buildings. That's what they came to. The infant mortality rate was 1 out of 2. 50% of babies died before their first birthday. The maternal mortality rate was 33%. Pregnancy was the kiss of death at that time. So that's what they came into. And they introduced modern medicine and the love of Jesus into a situation that had not known either before. And it made a massive difference. It really did. The number one word you hear from people is family. That's the word. That's the word that Sheikh Mohammed uses today. That's the word that the Emirati people use. And that's the word that we feel as well. It feels like family because we are family.
Looking forward, how do you see the future of the Abraham Accords?
Yeah, the future is bright. I think we've only just begun to scratch the surface, Chris, of what the Accords may achieve and what I believe they will achieve. I think the biggest thing is just the change of a mindset of a generation. It used to be that without question, there was a divide between Arabs and Jews. It just was not questioned. That was the accepted status quo. And in the blink of an eye, it seems that is all being washed away. And you're seeing young people now who are communicating online, who are visiting the other country, and they're actually making friends. I'm thinking as an American now, having lived 15 years in the Middle East, understanding this region well, America has no greater friend in this region than Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. And furthermore, Christians have no greater friend in the Middle East than Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. And now, with the Abraham Accords, we can add Jews to that as well.
Up next, a journalist roundtable about what we saw and heard on our Mideast tour. Thank you for watching Jerusalem Dateline. We're committed to providing you with unbiased reporting from the Holy Land. Through weekly broadcasts, podcasts, and online media, our vision is to reach millions around the globe with the true story of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East, all from a biblical and prophetic perspective. This is a big vision and is only made possible by the generous support of people like you.
Call us toll-free at 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/Jerusalem Dateline and make a donation that will help spread the light of truth about Israel throughout the world.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning. Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Plus, get exclusive stories and daily scripture encouragement just for you. Stay informed. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
Here's a reporters' roundtable on the perspective of the Abraham Accords, including Dan Cohen of Newsmax, Eric Steckelbeck of TBN News, and Joel Rosenberg of All Israel News and All Arab News. TBN's Eric Steckelbeck led the discussion.
With our all-star panel, Joel Rosenberg, and a new friend and a good friend, Daniel Cohen, Jerusalem correspondent for Newsmax TV right here in Israel. You were with us on the delegation, Daniel. Tell us about that.
I'm just watching. Journalistically, you know,
each high-level meeting, UAE and Bahrain, the signers of the Abraham Accords, and here in Israel, you know, these weren't like the one-off. But one thing that came up was, is the United States behind you? Everybody saw what happened in Afghanistan. One person, high level, again, we're not going to name who, I said, do you feel in the Iran dealings, this JCPOA 2.0 that's being pushed by this administration that Israel doesn't want? And Naftali Bennett said he'd rather have no deal than a bad deal. Yeah. And we said, do you feel the United States, if push would come to shove, would support Israel and would be supportive of this region? And there was a long pause. It was a long pause.
It was a very long pause.
And sometimes a non-answer is an answer, right? Yes. I mean, I think if I was looking at my watch, it was a solid 20, maybe 30 seconds of thought.
Usually, I've interviewed, and we all have, lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle in the United States and also in Israel. And usually when you ask that question, when it comes to the U.S.-Israel relationship, both, without pause, say, of course, Israel is our greatest ally, or America is our greatest ally. There's no stop and think, how do I answer this one? It has been automatic, usually, but we're in a different place now, as you said just a few minutes ago, Joel.
It very well may be the most profound moment of the entire trip, because what it tells us is that the people who are on the front lines, at the most senior level of all three of these governments, they love America, they need America, they want the closest possible alliance. They weren't partisan, they spoke highly in positive ways about Trump and about Biden. But when you press this one particular leader, do you feel like America's really going to stand with you when push comes to shove? And his ultimate answer was yes. But the 15 to 20 to 30 seconds that got there, you're like, the answer's no.
You know, in this region, what are they looking for? Well, they're looking for allies. Yeah. And just like your book, Enemies and Allies. Who's on my side? Who is on my team?
Prophetic implications of the Abraham Accords? What do you think?
Well, I think I would stick to the fact that 2 points. One, millions and millions and millions and millions of Christians around the world have been praying for the peace of Jerusalem. God has answered with 4 new Arab-Israeli peace agreements. I'd like to hear from Muslims and Jews how biblical prophecies are coming to pass, and prayers. I would say the Bible does say that before we get to the war of Gog and Magog, where a Russian dictator teams up with Iran and surrounds Israel, there's going to be a sense of security for the nation of Israel. They know Iran and Russia are problems, but right now they mostly feel secure, which suggests to me maybe the chessboard is being arranged for coming prophetic events. I don't know yet. It's too early to say, but that was my impression of this trip.
Things are moving, and I think one thing that struck the three of us and our entire delegation was what I would say religious freedom in those two countries. Just thinking that the largest church in the Arabian Peninsula, we were there, we were at a synagogue in Bahrain. Amazing times that we are living in.
Thanks for joining us on this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline, examining the status of the Abraham Accords and their future. Please continue to pray for these agreements, for the peoples in this region, and for the peace of Jerusalem. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.